So, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's a language that tells the browser how a website should look. What colors, fonts, sizes, spacing, layouts should it have? If you are new in the business or already have some experience with front-end development, then you probably heard about HTML, and now maybe you are wondering what's the difference between HTML and CSS. So the best analogy that I could give is that HTML is like a house skeleton. So walls, doors, windows, that's something what HTML is responsible for. But CSS is more about the appearance. So paint, color, wallpaper, furniture, structure of the windows, for example, that's something what CSS is responsible for. Okay, so after the introduction, it's a good moment to jump into IDE and let's try to understand how CSS rule works in practice and not only on the paper. In the CSS rule, we have three parts. First, there is a selector. Here on our example, it's H1 selector. It is the HTML tag that we are pointing at, and we are actually make CSS to understand that we want to style this element and this particular element on the page. After selector, here comes the curly braces. Those elements are responsible for creating the beginning of a rule and the end of the rule, and between them we put all the properties that we want to add to this particular H1 element. So the CSS rule needs a property and a value. And as you can see on the screen, property, it's an element that we want to change. And the value, it's an element that we want to change it to. Here on that particular example, as you can see, we want to change the color of the H1 element to blue. Let's see CSS in action. For the demo purpose, I commented out the H1 element, welcome to CSS. So we're gonna know which H1 element we are styling. Of course, it shouldn't be here, but just for purpose, I commented out here, so you will know what are we doing. And with that, of course, we have the H1 tag in the beginning and the end of the sentence. So here is also the selector that is pointing on that element. And after that, we have properties of color blue. And as you can see on the page on the right side, the color of the element, yes, you can guess it, it's blue. But we can change this element to any other color, like red, green, purple, orange. Those colors, of course, will work and will change the H1 color as well. It is important to also notice that you don't have to do one property per one selector. But as you can see on the screen, we can do much more properties connected to the one selector, like here, for example, right? So we have H1 with the color, let's say right now, it's hard for me to change, to say what is color it is. So let's say that now with H1 with a blue color and font size of 36 pixels. And those two properties are working together under the one selector. So you don't have to actually write H1 two times with one property for each selector. You have to remember though about the one thing, and this is semicolon. So this little bad boy out here is the element that actually is pointing as the end of the property rule or CSS rule. You can also call it like this. So if we're gonna delete this, you can see that the font size is started to get an error, and right now it's not working. So those styles are actually not applied on our the power of CSS H1. And it happened because right now CSS cannot tell where the rule is starting and when it's going to be finished. So here, for example, right now everything is working as well because we have the semicolon on the right place. In the other option, if we're gonna go and delete that on the font size, this element will work because after the font size, There is no other rule where CSS is gonna have a problem to understand where is the start and where is the finish of a CSS rule. But of course, to make it consistent all the time, we use the semicolon on every CSS rule, no matter if this is the first one or the last one. And with that, there's also one last notice that you have to remember and take into consideration is that we write one property per line for readability. So as you can see on the screen right now, there's one property for each line. We don't do something like this, but of course, this kind of styling would also work. But for readability, as I just mentioned, and right down there, we just do it with one per line. And of course, you don't really have to remember this kind of rule because with a modern coding, modern programming, we have a lot of extensions like, for example, Prettier or Slint. And those extensions are doing this kind of a refactoring on every save, for example, or whenever you're gonna toggle them. And they will automatically change the CSS to make it one rule per line. So you don't have to really worry about that. About the semicolon as well, those extensions are doing the work pretty well and just making those errors unerrored, let's say. The last thing that I want to mention in this video is the cascade in CSS and how it works. So as you can see on the screen, we have two rules applied to the same paragraph. So about the paragraph, what color will this text be? And as you can see, it happened to be blue and not red, even if the red paragraph styling is actually applied first. And it happened because of, cascading. So in CSS, we had to have some rule for the situation like this, when we have two styles connected to the same selector. And here in that example, how it works in CSS is that the second styling will always override the first one and all of them after that. So if you're gonna add another styling for this paragraph, so the last styling will actually be the one that's gonna be applied on our page. So if you're gonna comment it out color blue, it will change to the red one, but if you're gonna make it back, it will get back to the blue. And that's something really important in CSS, because with that, you will know better how the properties work, how your styling works, and why, for example, one styling is applied and one is not, and why it's not applied. So that's exactly gonna be the reason behind it. That was basically everything that I wanted to tell you in the first CSS episode. I thought that's gonna be much shorter, under 5 minutes, but well, happens otherwise. So we have to deal with that. I will create the subtitles for this video, the English subtitles, for the ones that don't really understand me correctly or fully. It might be actually better for you to have subtitles on, and it's gonna be easier for you to follow the video. And for the ones that want to also try to code this CSS or use the demo that I used for the video purpose, I will create the GitHub repository, and you can actually pull that repository and then try yourself to do something with the CSS. And that will be all. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you in the next video.